Today we have the special opportunity to talk to one of sports' legendary female athletes, award-winning broadcaster, a successful business executive, a Hall of Famer, and a sterling role model for not only young women, just for athletes in general, and that's Meyers, Drysdale. And you were born in San Diego, California, moved to La Habra, California, and you're one of 11 children, 6 boys, 5 girls. What was it like growing up in a crowded family like that?
Well, I think in a large family, my dad played basketball. He played basketball at
Marquette, right?
Right, yes. He was the captain there, and so when my parents moved from Milwaukee out to San Diego and started having all these children, and then we moved to Chicago for about 8 years because my dad worked for Sears, and then we moved back to La Habra, California, growing up in Southern California. So all those kids and all that energy in the house, it was great to be outdoors, whether we were playing football, basketball, kick the can, just to be outside and playing, and especially in Chicago in the Midwest, and we even played outside in the snow. It was a great time to be outside. So just all that energy and a lot of competition from the top to the bottom, and the little ones had to live up to the older ones, and the older ones were always in charge, and and you love to follow them because of how they competed.
You said your dad played at Marquette, was captain of the team. What influence did he have on your basketball career?
Well, I think he had a huge influence on all of us because he did travel when he worked for Sears, and when we were all younger and so forth. So when he'd go on the road, I think a lot of us really wanted to vie for his attention. And certainly our mom was, the matriarch and teaching us chores, and which we all had, and making our beds and putting our laundry away and doing the dishes and taking the trash out and so forth. But I think the work ethic that both our parents had taught all of us a lot, and we were able to channel that through sports. The majority of us all competed all through elementary school and high school, and some of us went on to college and play, and not everybody, but again, there was always that competition. But Dad, because he was a good athlete, and he would come and play basketball with us and taught us how to play basketball, and take a lopsided basketball and have to dribble in a dark closet, and or we had the pool in Southern California, and we'd have to dribble around the pool, both hands, both ways, and so he was competitive, and he wanted us to be better.
Yeah, growing up as a young lady, early on, you were considered to be a tomboy. Actually, it's a connotation we don't hear anymore in American society. But give us your definition of what then was considered to be a tomboy, and what did it create a stigma, or did you use it as a positive for yourself?
Well, for me, tomboy was obviously having older brothers, and we all wore hand-me-downs. Yeah. And my brother David, who went to UCLA, played for Coach
All-American there.
So he was 2 years older than I was, so I would always follow him, which he didn't appreciate all the time. Him and his brother, or him and his friends, and so I wore his jeans, and I wore the T-shirts, and I always had short hair. And at some point, I think in high school, I started growing a little bit longer, but it was about sports, I think, more so than anything else. Patty, who's the oldest in the family, she's 8 years older than I was, so I had a role model in her that she was always out playing sports, and she was the one that we went to the parochial schools back in Chicago, and we were outside of Philadelphia for about 6 months, but she went into the nuns and said, you guys don't have a volleyball team on the 7th grade girls team, and she organized it. She was one of those women that made things happen, those young girls that had a drive, and she was as competitive as anybody. And she's probably the best athlete in the family.
I was going to ask you that, of all the Meyers children, other than yourself, who was the best athlete?
Well, we all say it's Patty. And then Tom and Mark, and they played football, and Mark played football at Cal. But Patty would always beat them up. Patty we were all intimidated by Patty. But she was just this role model that she went and did it. Didn't matter what anybody said. And so to have her, and then also my brothers, gives you that confidence. And so if I was a tomboy, it was just because I played sports. But I didn't understand why it was bad, because I loved to do it, and I was okay at it, and I worked hard to be better. But why people didn't want me to play sports, I didn't know.
When you were 9, 10, 11 years old growing up, what was a typical day like in the Meyer household?
For me, because I'm the middle child, I have 5 brothers and 5 sisters. And so I always felt like I got lost in the middle. We wake up, get ready for school. Mom always had breakfast ready for us. She made lunches. In junior high, we caught the bus. In elementary school, we took our bikes or walked over to the elementary school. And in those days, you didn't have, and I as a parent was overprotective. The elementary school is maybe a mile away, half mile away. No way would I let my children walk by themselves. But in those days, we all did things like that on our own. I'm sure that you didn't have the microwaves, and you didn't have the kind of washing machines you did. I always remember Mom being over the ironing board and ironing shirts and doing laundry, lots of loads of laundry, and we certainly helped on that. When we got back from school, we did our schoolwork. Then we could go out and play, and sometimes we would help Mom make dinner, but we always had to set the table. We had chores to do, and so lots of times we were outside playing, but lots of times we were also inside helping out, doing our homework or doing something else, or getting into fights.
What was your least favorite chore?
My least favorite chore, probably the dishes. I mean, you didn't have the dishwasher back then.
You had a lot to wash in those days.
And probably setting the table and so forth, anything around dinner time.
When did you start to really take basketball seriously and kindle an intense desire to want to be the best?
Well, I think, again, going back to my dad, and it gave attention to do that. We were always around basketball because my parents were from Milwaukee. We grew up Green Bay Packer fans. So Sunday after we'd get back from church, we'd always go make sure that hopefully a Packer game was on, and Dad would be right there with his green and gold cap on and so forth. But we just, with sports, it was everything. It wasn't just basketball all the time. Whether we were out in the street, and it was David, my brother Jeff, and I, and we'd play football. Okay, you do this, and you go down here, button hook here, and go down long, cut right, and so forth. So, or you'd play 500, if you only had 2 people, kind of thing. We never had a basket at our driveway. We always went down to the playground and played basketball. And then you played over the line, or you played. I mean, there were just always other things to do. Because they didn't have organized sports when I was younger. You had track and swimming. For girls, which was probably the only 2 that I can think of, tennis and golf still was a rich man's game, and I still think it is today. And so we did things that we didn't cost anything. We just go out, and we had all these people, kids in the neighborhood that you'd go play sports. So basketball was always there, but we were always doing other things too. I got interested in track and field because it was an organized sport. And I read a book on Babe Didrikson when I was in 4th grade. And I thought, here was another woman that was an athlete that did softball and baseball and basketball and track and was an Olympian. And that was where my dream came to fruition as far as wanting to be an Olympian, like Babe Didrikson. And so track was the one sport that I really focused on. And because I wanted to go to the Olympics. But even though I was playing basketball and doing these other sports with my brothers, basketball was always there, but I was always doing other things too.
So even though I would think maybe back in those days, we really weren't introduced to the concept of a role model, but it appears that Babe was your early sports role model.
Sport-wise, yeah, even though my sister Patty was there in the family, and my mom as far as work ethic and so forth, and my brothers, but to read this book about somebody else, really made it look like, I can do this too.
So in the 5th and 6th grade, you actually played on the boys' basketball team. How did that come about, and what type of experience was it for you?
Well, if you remember in the 60s, that's when President Kennedy started the presidential fitness
A council.
Council throughout the country.
Yes.
So all these young kids were already doing the broad jump and the 50-yard dash and the softball throw. And so kids were getting involved in doing physical fitness, and I thrived on it. I loved it. And it gave me a chance to compete against the boys too, even though I had competed against my brothers and their friends. But this was school. And then in 5th grade, they started an after-school sports program, a basketball program for the boys. And I was like, well, why can't I play? And my parents went to the school district and the school, and unbeknownst to me, as a 10, 11-year-old, you don't know any of those things that your parents do. So they were able to get it passed for me to play on the team. And I'd always been playing with the boys after school and at recess and at the one break that we would have that the teachers would have you play ball. I had a 5th grade teacher who was great. We used to play prison ball, and he forced me to throw left-handed, which I was a little bit left-handed anyways, but that because I threw so much harder than the other girls, so he forced me to throw left-handed. But the after-school sports program was strictly for boys, and when my parents stepped in and was able to convince them to allow me to play, that's when it happened that I could play in 5th and 6th grade with the boys.
Looking back on it, do you feel that had a positive influence on your young career in sports?
I always do. Everything that's happened for me, even if it's not the way that I had hoped it would be. My brother Mark was playing at La Habra High School at the time, and his coach, Tex Wallace, was the guy in La Habra. He had won championships in that area in Southern California here and so forth. And so for him to even come out to one of my games as a 5th, 6th grader was, that was like, Coach Wooden coming to see a high school kid play kind of thing. And so I was getting recognized even at that early an age to compete, and not just basketball, but some of the other sports.
So early on as a young lady, you participate in almost every imaginable sport in grade school, junior high, high school. The question that I ask myself is, how in the world did Annie be able to balance her life with the sports, academics, social life, and that? How were you able to find a balance in between all the activities that you engaged in?
I think because of the family that we grew up in, they were my friends. My social life was really my friends, my family. And I wasn't as close to a lot of kids in school and even on the teams and so forth. I mean, I thrived on the individual sports too, whether it be track or tennis, and but team sports were always there because coming from a big family, and whether it was field hockey or softball and volleyball and so forth. But I knew that academics were important, always. I wasn't the greatest student. Probably could have been better if I spent more time on it too, but I knew that I was a CB kind of student. And but we always knew as kids in our family that you had to, in order to compete in sports, you had to do well on school work. And we all knew that we were going to go to college. I mean, that was just part of the process of our family. And I think that, for me, my sacrifice, and it wasn't a sacrifice because I loved doing it, was to play sports. So my social life, to me, didn't suffer. I mean, yeah, there were times as I got older and had crushes on guys and so forth, and wasn't asked out very much. But that's just part of the growing process. And but me, school was very important, and because that's how I could play sports.
During high school, did you ever find time to have a boyfriend, or really didn't have enough time to put in on that?
No, I was asked out a few times, and which was great. But again, like I said, when you're going through those emotions, when you're changing in high school and so forth, and but to me, my priority was always sports and my family, and I knew I could always socialize with my family, whether we went out to watch one of the other brothers or sisters that had an event, and I was pretty much a loner. Coming from a big family, I was very quiet, very shy, didn't speak to a lot of people, so socially that didn't bother me, that I didn't really mingle with a lot of high school kids.
So at Sonora High, You were a standout athlete in a variety of sports: track and field, volleyball, softball, field hockey, badminton, tennis. I'm just actually flabbergasted that not only did you find time to participate in them all, but that you excelled in them all. How in the world were you able to find time to participate in such a variety of sports and demanding sports?
Certainly, I had teachers that were very accommodating
Mm-hmm.
and supported me. And when I was in high school, they had GAA, Girls Athletic Association. They didn't have CIF yet for the girls. And I think that the teachers understood what kind of athlete I was. And they were accommodating to let me play 2 sports at one time. Didn't have to go to basketball practice all the time when I was able to go play in a tennis match, that kind of thing. But I probably, if I'd focused on one sport, certainly I could have even been better. But the competition for the girls then was not as high a standard as I'd been used to competing against the boys with my brother and his friends. So I think, competition, the sport always drove me. And but I think that sports always kept me active too. Whether I was doing that many sports, 7 different sports in high school, but it kept me active and it kept me not bored.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always driven to succeed.
Which of the 7 sports as a high school athlete, did you find the most challenging for you?
It's a good question. I would say probably tennis, because I wanted to be number one,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't good enough to be number one. And we had a lot of girls that played, and tennis and badminton. I really thrived on badminton because it was a difficult sport. People don't realize how quick it is, and really the technique that you have to have. And certainly when I wasn't number one, that made me feel like I wasn't that good. So I had to get better, and I worked at it.